How did I know I had a problem? Well, the first thing I noticed, I woke up one Saturday morning and my hands were swollen. I was a bit concerned because they were quite swollen. In fact, anybody I showed them to could tell too how swollen they were. It remained that way for a couple days. I went to the doctor the following week, and she agreed they definitely looked swollen. She did lots of labs, but couldn't find anything wrong, and so basically told me just to cut back on canned soup, and thought maybe that's why my hands were swollen. It was probably about a month or so after that. I was at work and I was working at my desk, and the back of my neck was sore, and I was rubbing the back of my neck. And as I was rubbing the back of my neck, I felt a lump. That kind of concerned me, but I had had lumps back there in the past by the lymph nodes, and I just kind of assumed it was probably some kind of allergic reaction. The next day, I went back to work and I noticed I had a stiff neck in that same area. The following day, I was back at work, and one of my bosses asked me to go and get the sports folder that was above my head, and I always would just reach up and grab it. But I went to reach up, and I couldn't raise my hand high enough to reach it. I think at that point I got a little more concerned. So I didn't say anything, I just stood up, I got the notebook, we went, completed the work we needed to do, and that was a Friday, and so spring break started the following Monday. So we left work on Friday, and that Sunday morning I went on to church, and we were running late, so we went up to the front row to have a seat because that was the only row open at that point. And we were sitting on the far left side, and I had to turn my head to see the pastor. I went to turn my head, and I wasn't able to get my head turned around enough to see him. That was a big concern. So Monday morning, I went straight to Med Express. I got up Monday morning and I went on to Med Express. The doctor felt the lump, and he was also equally concerned, and he went ahead and he did labs, and he did call me the next day and tell me the labs were all fine, but he really felt that it was important for me to follow up pretty quickly. I called my PCP. My PCP was unable to see me, so I did go on to another practice. I went to Piedmont Family Practice, and I saw a doctor there. She felt the lump, and she was also concerned, and she felt the first step would be to go have an ultrasound. So I did. I went and I had an ultrasound, and after the ultrasound, we got the results, and the ultrasound basically just recommended possibly going on with a CT or an MRI, but we just all felt at that point it would probably be best to go on and see a surgeon. So they referred me to a surgeon who was in the Warrenton area, but he also had an office in Prince William. Went down to his office in Prince William the following day, saw him. He felt the lump, and he agreed, since there was a lot of stiffness in my neck, it had to come out one way or the other. So we went ahead and set surgery up for the next day, and he removed the lump the next day. A week later, I called him to get a report, and that's when I was told that I had cancer. Originally, it was diagnosed as a sarcoma. I went to see him the next day, and we talked, and he said that during the first surgery, he wasn't able to get it all. He had just gotten part of it out. And so he really felt that it was important, now that it was cancer, to go ahead and have the rest removed. But it was quite entangled in blood vessels. So he felt that it would be best to have it done at, a university type hospital was his recommendation. So he recommended Georgetown. He offered to set up the appointment. He offered to do some research and find out who the best person to see would be. So I took him up on the offer, and he did. He set it up, and the next week I went down to Georgetown and I met with the surgeon there. He ordered an MRI, and a week later, or a couple weeks after that, it ended up being 3 weeks between the two surgeries, he operated down at Georgetown. The next step after the operation was to go on and start radiation. So Georgetown kind of went back and forth, and I met with the radiation oncologist there, and then we all decided probably the best thing would be for me to go down to UVA. It would be a much better commute, since I would probably have to have radiation for about 36 days. During that time, as I was getting ready to set up radiation and meet with the different people, I got a call from the second surgeon who told me the pathology had come back from the second surgery, and it wasn't a sarcoma. They had now determined that it was melanoma, and at this point they determined it was stage 3C melanoma. So I went and I met with the radiation oncologist down at UVA, and we discussed options. And I mentioned that I lived in Culpeper and really had heard wonderful things about the Hope Center. So he agreed, and he set me up an appointment to go meet with the doctor there at the Hope Center in Culpeper. So I met with him, and that's where I had my radiation. I had 36 treatments on my neck, and then later I ended up having 5 more treatments on my hip. But that wasn't right away because we didn't realize that at the time. When I was finished up with radiation, it was back down to UVA to the Emily Currett Clinical Cancer Center, where I was meeting with my medical oncologist. After the radiation, we felt that at that point, hopefully I would be cancer free. Everything had been removed and I had completed the radiation. But a month or two after radiation, my medical oncologist did scans. And he came in, it was probably 2 months following radiation, and he came in, and that's when he told my husband and I that had metastasized to the lungs, the liver, the spleen, and then later it was determined to also be in my hip. So we were really disappointed to see that, and of course we now had to come up with a more aggressive type treatment. And so the next step was to figure out what to do next. It was recommended to me down at the Emily Currett Clinical Cancer Center by my medical oncologist that the best thing to do would be to look into a clinical trial that was being done down there at the university. And so it took a while, and there was a lot of back and forth. At first there were no openings, but eventually I did qualify, and I was able to get on a clinical trial which consisted of a combination of Yervoy and Opdivo.